man. Not another day like last Tuesday.
Cause it's Taco Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The big news.
Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday number 15, where our learning goal is to determine two or more central ideas of a text and analyze their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. At the end of today's lesson, you'll be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. A 4 meaning that you can identify the central idea or ideas, you can point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and you can look at how those ideas build on one another. A 3 means that you can identify the ideas or the central idea in the text and point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. A 2 means that you are unsure of how to find, or that you can identify the central idea, but you don't really use the evidence. We'd like everyone to be at a 3 by the end of the year, so kind of getting everyone to confidently say 3 is the goal. That's the closest to the actual learning objective. But if you're missing some of that evidence, I can help maybe ask better questions in the next Tuesday Newsday if you tell me that you're a 2, so that I know where to improve my teaching as well. And a 1 means you are unsure of how to find the central idea of the text. Today's articles are centered around teens and caffeine consumption. The first article is titled Teens. Iced vanilla latte might taste good, but it could lead to problems. And the second article is titled Caffeine may affect teen boys and girls differently. Right now at the Write and Ed puzzle, there is links to each of the 2 articles and a link to the audio book of me reading the articles. So you have an option to either read them on your own or read them along with the audio book. Please do so now. All right, we are going to move on to the vocabulary portion of today's lesson. For the sake of today's lesson, every word that shows up on the screen here shortly will come from Article 1. So every word comes from Article 1. The first word is toting. The second word is amplifying. The third word is inhibit. The fourth word is diuretic. And the fifth word is consolidated. Moving on to the worksheet now. We're going to work through 4 different ways of sort of identifying what that main idea is and why the main idea is what it is. The first is identifying the topic. This typically comes through in the headline and introduces the main idea, but does not always get all the way at the main idea. The main idea typically comes out in the details. So for the first article, Article 1, what would you identify as the topic? For Article 2, how would you identify the topic? Moving on to summarizing the story. I ask you to summarize the story in 2 different lengths in order to help you sort of process the way in which you absorb the material and explain it. So for Article 1, please summarize the story in exactly 12 words, now. And in exactly 32 words, now. And for Article 2, please summarize that in 12 words, now. And please summarize Article 2 in 32 words, now. The first and last sentence are typically good indicators of what the main idea will be as well, and that's absolutely true again here. And so the first sentence typically is an introduction to what the main idea will be, and the last sentence is a nice recap. So let's take a look at the first article and identify the first sentence, now. And identify the last sentence, now. Moving on to the second article, please identify the first sentence, now. And the last sentence, now. All right, on to the main idea before we get to responding to the quote. So the main idea of the article, this is going to be up to you to kind of decide what you think it is. Remember, it's not just directly from the headline. Typically, this comes through in the details. So now that you've read the article, I hope that you will have some idea as to what the main idea is. For the first article, please write what you think the main idea is now. And for the second article, please write your assumption of the main idea now. Back to Article 1 again and responding to the quote. You did not choose a main idea based on nothing, based on a whim. There was something in the article that stood out to you, that gave you that idea of what the main idea is. Those are typically quotes from interviewees or something that the author wrote. Please identify word for word a direct quote from the story, something that led you to the main idea that you wrote for Article 1. Please do so now. And the next question is, why do you think that this quote was included in the story? What does it add? Please answer that now. And on to the second article. Again, identify a quote that you think helps support the main idea now. And looking at why was this quote included in the story? Please answer that now. On to finding a third article. Find a third article related to the topic, provide the link, and tell me how the main idea differs from the two that I've already provided. So you're going to go out onto the internet, find an article related to teens and caffeine, provide the link, and then read it and tell me how the main idea is different from the two that I've provided. Please do so now. Here are the answers to the main ideas of the article. The main idea of the first article is that it goes beyond the headline because it identifies more than just the problems that caffeine can lead to. The article addresses healthy ways to be healthier and how to avoid those problems. And before we move on to the second article, I'll ask this question. How was the main idea that you wrote different than what I have written here? What might you add to your main idea? What might you change? And on to the second main idea, or the main idea of the second article, that by certain measurements, the heart rate and the blood pressure of kids, caffeine might affect boys differently than girls. So the heart rate and the blood pressure of boys was different than it was of girls. It also brought up things like how puberty caffeine might affect a person before and after puberty. How did what you wrote down differ from what I wrote here? What might you add? What might you change? Please answer that now. And here are a couple of quotes that you could have added. This is a bit subjective. There's options here. Here's one from each article that I wrote that you may have decided to write as well. For Article 1, I wrote there are alternative ways to boost energy that may not taste as sweet as that Frappuccino, but are measurably healthier. Eat a diet of whole foods that is high in complex carbs, healthy fats, and B vitamins. Get regular exercise, drink lots of water, and get at least 9 hours of sleep every night. That sort of supported how you can combat the problems that caffeine leads to. In Article 2, individuals would not be able to notice a difference, and you would certainly not take one boy and one girl and expect to find the differences between them. This got to the main idea because just in the headline it said may affect boys and girls differently. And that's kind of what this article or this quote says. It's that it's not going to be like, well, I'm going to choose a random boy and a random girl and notice those differences. But on the whole, those differences appear to exist. So you might choose those. You might choose others. I will take a look at what you chose, and probably it will work as long as you are able to explain why you think that quote is included in the story. And lastly, here we have our learning scale. Just as a reminder, this learning scale is not as much as an assessment of you. Well, it's probably as much an assessment of you as it is of me. I use your responses to change what I do in Tuesday Newsdays and ask better questions, highlight better quotes, identify reasons why I make choices that I do and why the main idea exists as it does. What in the story tells us that that's the main idea. So I use what you tell me to improve my practice as well. So as much as of it is an assessment of you, it's an assessment of me. Where would you rate your ability to determine the central idea of the text? Would you put yourself at a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? And finally, why did you rate yourself at that number? Thank you. Completing this lesson has earned you your unit for today.